All right, let's get going. Good morning, everyone. Wednesday, June the 7th. Great to have you here. We've been talking about Dr. Thurman Fleet's The Stick Man and just sharing some deeper information with regards to how to understand how our mind works, right? How we actually take something from formless substance and create it into form, whether we think about that from a spiritual perspective, or we look at it from a quantum physics perspective. The verbiage is actually the same, taking something from the formless substance and creating it and manifesting it into form. And we talked about our beliefs and our values and our actions. And so I want to bring in our basic human needs. So like there's six human needs that were first talked about, oh my goodness, in the 40s or 50s, I think it was. Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Today I want to talk about love, security, and self-esteem. And so when we're born, we have all of those. We have a plethora, like we're an abundance of love, security, and self-esteem, meaning that's how we come out. We come out with, right, this unconditional love, and self-esteem and security, or just maybe a blank, a blank slate. And so as we are raised in the environment that we're raised, those things can be affected, the love, security, and self-esteem. And part of that happens because we talked about this the other day, and no judgment for our parents, they didn't know any better, but in order to have us conform or listen to the rules for our own, the safety and security lots of times as well, then guilt and shame are often used. And so when that happens, when guilt and shame are used, or pulling away of one's love, right? So being punished in a way that unless you're paying attention to your mom or dad or conforming to your mom and dad, then there's punishment, which affects our self-love, our self-esteem, and our image. But when we're born, we have no love issues, right? We come out pure joy, pure love. And but the other pieces, I guess, we're not really born with them. We learn them. It's a learned behavior, right? Self-esteem, self-image, self-worth, all learned behavior. So the child is 100% reliant on their parent, often the mother, to be fed for a very long time. And what can happen is that if the mother doesn't bond with the child, and at one point in time, bonding with kids is actually discouraged, right? So if the mother doesn't bond with the child, this actually, the child can feel this energetically as well. And so this is where the lack of self-esteem, self-image, self-worthiness comes from. And or if a parent uses punishment, like clean your room or you don't get a hug, like things like that, or I'm angry with you so I can't hug you, or just the things that happen in people's worlds, right? This is why there's a challenge really with self-esteem and self-love. So when a child feels insecure, it will act out in various different ways. And so, for example, if a child feels insecure, they might act out by wanting more hugs, right? Running to a parent for hugs, or they might be more sullen, go to their corner and be by themselves. They might rebel. There's no one way that this happens. So each individual will behave in a certain way, depending on whether they feel secure or not. And so throughout our lifetime, if we've had experiences where we felt, whether it was true or not, that someone's love or admiration or respect or whatever was being withheld, that can create us to choose different roles. So we can be like the rebel. That might be a role that you picked up for later on in life. The quiet one. Oh, she's so quiet. The good one, right? The worldly one. I mean, there's all of these roles that each one of us played in life. It kind of starts from this aspect of when we're born and we're looking at our parents, short-term, long-term, for self-esteem and security. So if a child ever has experienced not being wrong, right, or having their love withheld, then they wouldn't have some of these issues. But there's not a lot of people that at least my age that I know, that weren't parented like, right, that like how I was parented, which was, kids need to be seen and not heard kind of thing, right? And so we're just reminding us again that we don't have the ability to reject, right? The information comes in and we just, up until the age of 7, we just accept everything, right? It's just really there all the time. Now, most important, what I wanted to share with you, and I wrote this down, hang on, didn't want to, is a series of questions to ask yourself if you want to uncover maybe some of the limiting beliefs that you have about relationship. So the first question would be, do you love yourself unconditionally? And not in a conceited way, but do you love yourself unconditionally? Can you look yourself in the mirror and, look yourself in the eye in the mirror and tell yourself that you love you? And does it mean that you're not going to be disappointed in your behavior sometimes, or that you think that you could do better? Unconditional love doesn't necessarily mean like from that perspective, but do you love yourself unconditionally? The second question is, can you give love without needing anything in return? So can you give love without needing anything in return? I'm just going to take a sip of my coffee. The next question is, can you receive love from other people? So can you receive love in an intimate relationship, in friendship, in business, right? Can you receive that? Does it make you feel awkward if people compliment you or want to be with you or want to be near you, want to talk with you? And then another question is, can you give and receive love without conditions of any kind? So can you give without conditions? Can you receive without conditions? Or do you have an expectation if you're giving, or an expectation? If someone's giving you love, do you have an expectation or a definition of what that means? And then we talk about it from a security perspective. Security, or actually the lack of security, is really what stops us from taking like the proverbial chance, right? Moving forward to being the person that we want to be, because there's an unknown. Anytime there's something that we want to do that we don't know how, our brain goes into overdrive, because our brain, number one, is a goal achieving machine and it wants security. So if we can think about this, what represents security for you? And these questions, especially the security ones, had a profound effect on me, because up until this time, I had done questions around love and relationship before, but up until this time, when I took this, I had not been asked this, right? That what represents security for me. And it can be anything. It can be a certain amount of money in the bank. It can be something to do with business, and not money, something to do with personal relationships. Everyone's is different. So what represents security for you? And then the next question is, and I guess the other way you could ask that is, what makes me feel secure? Right? That might be an easier question. Then the next question is, what makes you feel fear or insecure? So what conditions, what feelings, what situations will have you feel fear or insecure? And this is in all areas of your life. Right? So what will have you feel insecure? And then what must you know in order to make a decision? So what must you know in order to make a decision? That's a huge one, because if you, if you move into, and I had a tendency to, and my default position is my brain, right? My IQ. And so if I find myself making a decision purely from my intellect, purely from my IQ, it's often a different decision. Not always, but often a different decision. And I can tell it feels different as I make the decision, because I'm making it here, right? So what must you know in order to make a decision? And then the last question that I wanted to ask you is, what rules do you have in place that prevents you from doing what you want? So what rules do you have in place that prevents you from doing what you want? right? And that can, again, it can be anything. So what rules do you have in place that prevents you from doing what you want? And that's so an example would be, I had rules in my head before that if a couple has a strong marriage, that they live in the same house and they do everything together, right? And so if that's that prevents me from doing the things that I want, right, that I want to do, right? I want to have a place in Costa Rica, and I want it to be a place that a sanctuary for myself. I want it big enough that I can have guests, and but even looking at the possibility of like having a retreat center and all of that. So I've just been looking at a whole bunch of really, really cool real estate. But if I had a rule that Rob and I would have to go there together all the time in order for me to do this, which is the rule that I used to have about being in a relationship, that couples had to do things together in order to stay together, then this dream would be more difficult because of what's happening with Leo and what's happening with Rob. So I would have let that dream go and dream what the boys are dreaming, and follow their dream versus doing what I want to do. So what rules do you have in place that prevent you from doing what you want? And so although these are simple questions, I actually encourage you to take some time today and to really, really ponder them, right? Because these are the things, especially when it comes to safety and security, these are the things that could be your stopping points, because we're designed for safety and security, right? We come out requiring safety and security. And so it's something that can be taught. And if we don't feel safe and secure when we're a child, then that can make a huge difference in the decisions that we make as an adult, right? So, when I was growing up, there wasn't a lot of safety and security. There's often not a lot of safety and security, even if people don't know it, in an alcoholic home. Everything is unstable. And so then children of alcoholics make decisions a little bit differently, and often based out of the need for safety and security, the need for control. And so their decisions can look differently. They can be, for example, I would say, the dog with the bone thing that we talked about. I think I gave this an example a couple of days ago, right? That is a consequence of being a child of an alcoholic. And it could be that I'm Scorpio as well, if any of you follow like astrological signs, where Scorpios are known to be a little stubborn. And it can be, or it could be none of those, and it just could be a thing, right? So we often don't need an explanation, or a reason is not required or necessary. It can just be fun. It can just be a lot of fun. And so today is just going to be super short, because I didn't want to confuse the day with too many points, but really just wanted to talk to you about these pieces, and would love for you to take a moment today and answer them. And then tomorrow we're going to talk a little bit about what all of that means, right? So great, you've answered all these questions. That's fantastic. What the hell do you do with the information? And so in the next couple of days, we're going to talk about how to take that information and integrate it so that you can start to embody it, right? So that you can understand, especially as you're making decisions. And as an entrepreneur and a professional, there's decisions that you need to make, are required to make, right, on a daily basis. And if you're making them from a place of lack, or a place of indecision, or a place of fear, it feels different in your body. But also what happens is the outcome is attached to the feeling of lack. And that can be really, really stressful long term. All right, everyone. Big hugs, love you. We'll talk to you tomorrow. Short and sweet today. Bye.